Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Matt Velasak. I'm VP of Product here at Jamf.
Hi everyone, my name is Tamvir Ahmed. I am the product lead for device access at Okta.
And we're here today to talk about modern Apple identity with Jamf and Okta. We've got a packed schedule, so let's get started right away. So here's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. We're going to talk about identity and how it's a key pillar of our trusted access model. We're going to talk about Apple's platform identity innovations and how Apple is really pushing the envelope with identity on their platforms. We'll go into some demos of Jamf and Okta working together and how we're making some of these things come to life. We'll do a deep dive on how you can make this work in your organization. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the stuff that Apple introduced this year at WWDC. All right, so identity is a pillar of our architectural model called trusted access. Now, before we dive into that, what that really means, let's look at this, what's happening. Like, identity is becoming a major component of Apple's operating systems. It is a paradigm shift from what was there before. And as we'll explore throughout this webinar, there's a lot that Apple has provided that just simply wasn't there a couple of years ago and really turns Apple devices into an enterprise-grade, enterprise-ready tool. So with that, we look at trusted access as a holistic solution for managing Apple devices in the enterprise. It resembles a zero trust architecture in a lot of ways, where you have this layered system and components from device management, identity and access, and endpoint security. Now, while we're not going to dive into all of trusted access today, what is really important to call out is that the key principle behind it is that only authorized users on enrolled devices that are secure and compliant can access sensitive organizational data. And as far as verified identities are concerned, this is where we are looking towards our partnership with Okta to really help to bring those together. So on that, let's talk a little bit about what Apple has done from a platform perspective in the last couple of years. So the first thing that Apple has built, and it has been out since iOS 13 and macOS 10.15, is single sign-on extension. Now, what this is a capability that identity providers can embed within their endpoint application that enables these really great passwordless and biometric-based authentication methods to happen. So what happens is the identity providers like Okta will implement the single sign-on extension, and when the user is logging into their applications, instead of being prompted to type in their username and password over and over again, you will see a prompt a lot like this, where the user can sign in using their biometrics. We'll get into how Okta has implemented this in particular in a few minutes. Next up, we get a little bit more recent with some of the announcements that they had last year. So platform single sign-on is a really exciting new capability where they are taking the first steps in binding a local macOS's user identity or user account with their IDP identity. And so what that basically means is synchronizing and keeping in sync the password of that local macOS account and the password that has been set within the identity provider. So this means that there's one password for the user to remember across their when they're logging into their Mac, as well as when they're logging into all their apps. Now, this is great because it works well with Touch ID, meaning you don't have to type your same password all the time, but your password is securely stored in a secure enclave so that you have easy access without compromising security. And again, this leverages single sign-on. So as soon as you get platform single sign-on set up, you have some great login flows to your applications at the point following unlocking or logging into your Mac. So we'll dive into this again as well in a few minutes from the Okta perspective. More recently, Apple has introduced platform single sign-on. And what this does is it binds a local macOS user account with their that same user's IDP identity. And what this really means is that it's able to keep the user's credentials, most like the user's password, in sync between the two systems. So this means as you change your password on the IDP, you will be required to update your password on your Mac. Now, this is great because you have one password to remember and you don't end up in lockout situations because you forget which password you've set on each device. Now, best of all, from a user experience perspective, that password is saved using a secure enclave back key, meaning that you can still use Touch ID to unlock your Mac. So you're not sacrificing any of the simplicity of logging into your Apple device day in and day out. And by signing up platform single sign-on on a Mac, you also enable the single sign-on extension through the identity provider as well. So this means as soon as you unlock your Mac and you open up an application that requires login, you are able to get into that as well. There we go. Next up, enrollment single sign-on. Now, this new capability simplifies the user onboarding process into Apple's user enrollment BYOD solution. So we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but the key thing to know here is that Apple has put single sign-on and the identity provider as the very first step to get a device enrolled into a BYOD management model. Now, this again leverages the identity provider's native iOS application and the single sign-on extension, making it so you have this really great native experience that is within an application to get yourself fully set up and onboarded. Now, as part of that whole process, you also, again, set up the whole single sign-on extension, meaning after you do onboard into BYOD, all of your logins to your applications are a matter of a Face ID scan. So again, really cool integration and innovation by Apple. Now, the thing to know about Apple and how they do all these things is they really prioritize blending these three components: security, manageability, and UX and privacy. And so this is really important because Apple really looks at the user experience as one of the main, and privacy as really important principles to their feature designs, while also not forgetting about security and manageability. So a lot of these things are designed to optimize all these things, and it really helps with the end user experience in the end. And so we talk about these technologies and a lot more at the Apple IT Tech Camp. So Jamie, who's a colleague of Tamvir's here, and I managed to get on a session that Apple hosted a few months ago. Definitely check it out. It's a recap of some of the things we're talking about here, but also Apple introduces some other great innovations that they've been working on as well. All right, now with that, let's just jump into some of the stuff that we are doing at Jamf and Okta to make all this stuff real. So Tamvir, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. The first thing we're going to talk about today is going to be OCTA Fastpass, which leverages the single sign-on extension. OCTA Fastpass is part of Okta Identity Engine, or OIE, and it works by securely storing device credentials in the secure enclave on your device, whether it's your macOS or your iOS device. The benefit of OCTA Fastpass, beyond the great user experience that it offers, is the fact that it offers phishing-resistant MFA on both your managed and your unmanaged devices. It works seamlessly when you deploy it using Jamf Pro on any of your Apple devices, and you're able to actually collect additional attestation about the device, whether it's using the Okta management attestation to collect whether the device is managed, or additional device context through device assurance. There's unique support for even other browsers rather than Safari, such as Chrome, and it's available today via the SSO or the MFA license if you have Okta. We'll also talk about Okta Device Access. Okta Device Access allows you to achieve use cases using desktop password sync for macOS, which allows you to sync the local account password on your macOS with your IDP password. It also allows you to enable desktop MFA, which allows you to enforce MFA whether your device is online or offline. You can activate both of these features using Jamf Pro and a configuration profile. And once enabled, you can view registered devices, perform lifecycle actions such as suspend a device so that users can't access the device anymore. And it also allows you to really enjoy additional benefits like having a password that's consistent across whether it's on your Mac or on the IDP side. The nice thing about device access is the enrollment flow is unified with Okta Fastpass. So when you enroll using device access, you're actually also enrolled in Okta Fastpass. So you get this really nice, seamless experience end to end. Let's actually take a look at that experience on macOS. So what we'll show is desktop password sync. And in this walkthrough, what you'll see is the single sign-on extension really at work. You'll see how the single sign-on extension really blends in the experience from a native Safari perspective when you're trying to access the individual applications, how it uses the power of the Okta org, and it actually blends it all together in the native like Mac experience. So desktop password sync, as a reminder before we start, allows you to leverage the new platform as single sign-on capability in macOS. You can configure it using the Jamf Pro configuration profile. What you'll see is a user is going to authenticate into their Okta tenant using MFA, and that process actually registers the device with Okta. Once that registration step is complete, the password on the device is actually synced to your Okta password. So it's the same password now to sign into your device. And what you'll see is it actually also sets you up with Okta Fastpass so you can sign into applications that are protected by Okta at the end. So let's start with just unboxing a brand new machine. We're going through Apple Business Manager here. And so initially you start setting up your device. Because it's automatically configured, you automatically get enrolled into your MDM. So Jamf Pro in this case. Jamf, in order to sign in, you can actually create certain enrollment customizations so you can sign in to your organization and have any branding you'd like here. And if you have MFA set up in order to sign into Okta, like you can enforce that at this step as well. If you'd like to set up the initial account on the device as you're going through Apple Business Manager, you can do so using Jamf Pro and Jamf Connect. The original or the first account on the device can be configured in a specific way. And once you're there and you're on the desktop, the user actually gets access to this new notification. And when you interact with it, you'll see the platform SSO capability in action here using Okta's desktop password sync. The user will authenticate into their organization, as you'll see here. If required, you'll go through the app sign-on policy configured for desktop password sync here. And once authenticated, the rest of platform SSO is going to come into play here. The user is going to be prompted for their local account password. And if the local account password does not match their IDP password, the user will be prompted to enter their IDP password here as well. What's happening behind the scenes is that this is actually changing the local account password to match the IDP password. And it's also enrolling the device into Okta Fastpass as well. At this point, the local Mac password should be synced with your IDP. Now, when you unlock your device, you can unlock it using your IDP password or just Touch ID. Because the desktop password sync flow has enrolled you in Fastpass, you'll actually see it in action if you try to access any resource protected by Okta. When you're in Safari and you're trying to access a corporate resource, you'll see all you do is touch with Touch ID. And if you open the Mail app, you'll see that even in a native app, you'll also see the Fastpass flow here. Instead of having to type in anything on the Okta IDP screen, you'll see you just touch with Touch ID, and you're signed in using a phishing-resistant authenticator. Phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication can be achieved without another device or another token. And this is great for organizations that really want to optimize for a great user experience and maintain a really high bar of security.
All right, so all the cool stuff that Tamvir just showed to you is brought to you through Okta's device access capabilities. Now, what's really exciting about this is Okta Device Access is bringing Okta Cloud Identity to macOS natively by leveraging platform SSO. Now, traditionally, Jamf Connect has provided a lot of these capabilities. But what's great about this is now Apple is providing Okta a native and better way of doing things like password sync. Now, that being said, Jamf Connect will still be required for the foreseeable future to close a lot of functional gaps that enable macOS to meet broader identity and access management requirements. So let's dig into some of the details of what that means. So when you look at the two capabilities side by side, you can see that on the Jamf side, there are overlaps with how we do things with password sync. But without going through all the detail here, there are several important things that Jamf does, like local account provisioning, AD bound to local account migrations, and local account controls and restrictions that simply Platform SSO doesn't do yet. So until those are available and until Okta is able to implement those into device access, Jamf Connect can work right alongside device access to fill those gaps and make sure that everything works in a clear and unified way. So with that, it's exciting to say, Tamvir, device access available now. So it's an early access, and we're going to get into some details on how to make that happen here in a second. Okay, so a quick note on just mobile. We want to talk about that a little bit here too. So you saw a lot with Mac, but there's kind of two flavors of devices we should talk about here. One is corporate-owned devices. And what you're going to see here in this video is how elegantly and quickly you can get a corporate-owned device enrolled completely passwordlessly using a QR code in this case. So what happens is this is a brand new device that has been unboxed and automatically provisioned in a Jamf Pro, a lot like a Mac, using automatic device enrollment. And Okta Verify is automatically pushed to the device. And as soon as the user has to use some resource that requires Okta to log in, they're going to be able to open up Okta Verify, register their device, get Fastpass going with single sign-on extension, and then you have these great phishing-resistant login flows for all the apps on that device without the user having to go to the App Store or do anything in particular besides just logging in that first time using their credentials or using a passwordless flow like you saw there. So really cool, great way to get corporate-owned devices onboarded and using phishing-resistant credentials right out of the box. And then next up is personally owned devices. Now, we're really excited about BYOD because there's just a ton of opportunity to improve the way that organizations enable personal devices to access sensitive corporate resources. And that is by putting a lightweight management profile on the device where there's a very clear separation between personal data and work data. Now, what's really cool here, what you're seeing with Enrollment SSO is, again, Apple has put the identity provider at the very first step of login. I simply type in my email address, my organization's email address. That recognizes I have to use Okta Verify to log in as my IDP. It downloads the app, and here you see I'm going through the process of logging in for the first time using my credentials on my personal device. So I'm logging in using my username. I'm going to put in my password as well. And what this is going to do is this is going to fully set up Okta Fastpass so that not only can I get through the rest of the enrollment process for user enrollment to put that lightweight MDM onto my device, but Okta Verify has been now fully set up so that I'm able to go and use my Face ID to access and log into all of my applications. So this is a very cool capability. It's a combination of a lot of technologies coming together to make this happen. But again, it's putting identity at the very beginning of an enrollment process into MDM. Now, I'll be remiss not to talk a little bit about ZTNA as part of the other half of identity and access. So Jamf Connect provides a ZTNA technology and capability that is a layer 3 VPN essentially, but it is very, very tightly coupled with identity. Now, as you just saw there, with a few taps of opening Jamf Trust, it leveraged the single sign-on extension to automatically enable enable the VPN by using the user's strongly attested identity using phishing-resistant credentials brought to you by Fastpass and Face ID so that you were able to get that VPN turned on, fully configured against your user identity and then your groups to determine how and what you should have access to. So now that device has full access to what it needs based upon your roles and your identity. So this works great on corporate-owned devices. It works with managed apps using per app VPN on those BYO devices. So the VPN is only available to those managed apps with that managed identity through Okta Fastpass. And it is just a seamless way to get end-to-end identity and access management working together. All right, Oh, and this is a way that it could show how you could log in now. So this is an application that is behind a firewall. So it's an internal app. We saw it on the Mac a minute ago. Just like on the Mac, I just get in here and then I'm able to access this internal application. Thanks to OCTA Fastpass and the integration between the network and identity and MDM and everything coming together for a seamless experience. Okay, so our whole philosophy through all of this of how we are working with Jamf and Okta, especially on mobile, is right-sized device management with fully integrated cloud networking and modern authentication to underpin it all. So we really see this as an enhanced security and UX toolkit using one set of tools from one set of vendors that will work across all ownership models of devices, whether it's a BYO iPhone or a corporate-owned Mac. All of this works together. It's the same Okta Verify app. It's the same Jamf Trust app that's enabling these VPNs. It's the same single sign-on extension across both Mac and iOS and iPadOS. So you have these great user outcomes regardless of the Apple device you're using that allows you to have better security, again, through phishing-resistant credentials, and better UX through integrated biometrics that really makes this whole experience wonderful on an Apple device. That's why we're so excited about all this. All right, so we've done the kind of high-level talk here. We've given you the demos so you can see it. Now we're going to go through some of the lower-level details of how you can implement this. Now, we don't nearly have enough time to show how you do all the bits and pieces, so we're going to go through a couple of steps. You will see QR codes, which you can scan that will give you direct links to the documentation for the respective documents for both the Jamf and Okta side on how you can set all this up if you go and review the recording. So first up, I just want to talk about the main participants, the main players, and how this all holds together. So you have the Apple Business or School Manager, you have Okta Workplace Identity, and you have Jamf Pro and Jamf Connect as two different products. Now, if you look at how all these kind of hang together, you have on the ABM side, you have auto device enrollment, which we talked about, which is how you have and that has an integration with Jamf Pro to allow you to have that experience with that when you unbox a new device, it enrolls directly into your MDM. That's nothing too new. A lot of Jamf admins, a lot of mobile admins and Mac admins are very familiar with this already, but it's worth calling out. The other bit here is Managed Apple ID Federation. And this is where you are using Managed Apple IDs, which is the corporate version of an Apple ID, to use its authentication from an identity provider like Okta. So it's using OpenIDC Connect to allow you to do those logins. So that's how you got that experience when I was logging in through user enrollment. That was using my managed Apple ID, and I was using Federation with Okta to go through that login and authentication process. Next up, we have Fastpass and device access. So the new feature we just talked about, and we are using Jamf Pro in its capacity to deploy those capabilities and those services and profiles and apps to make those experiences hang together that we showed. And then we're also showing how we are using, again, OIDC. We're using Jamf Pro and Jamf Connect are using Okta for login using OIDC apps. And again, that enables single sign-on extension to work because we're using modern authentication in both Pro and Connect to be able to authenticate the user. And that is what that is how all this is working together. So with that kind of high-level context, let's dive in. So first up, if you will need to have Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager to make any of this happen. Now, most organizations, again, already have this if they're doing automated device enrollment. And if you don't, you go to business.apple.com or school.apple.com. There's that little link there that says sign up now in the lower right. You prove that you're a legitimate business, and then you are able to get one of these accounts where you can start to do everything that's required from here. So step 2 is you set up auto device enrollment. So that is how you get that experience from an out-of-the-box Mac or out-of-the-box mobile device to automatically enroll into Jamf Pro and to start to receive all the profiles and apps that we will describe in the following kind of capabilities here. Next up, you configure domains and federated authentication. So we use in this video Jamf Autos in a lot of examples. And so what you'll see here is I need to register that I own Jamf Autos with my Apple Business Manager account. I then set up federated authentication, which is basically saying anytime jamfautos.com email address is entered, it is what points to the appropriate service. Now you're going to see here, it says Microsoft Azure Active Directory, and we're talking about Okta. As of the time of this recording, you have to federate your Okta tenant with Microsoft Azure for this flow to work, but that is all going to be changing in the fall, which we'll talk about here in a second. Now, once you have those capabilities set up, the last step is if you have people with personal Apple IDs that are squatting on your domain, so say, matt@jamfautos.com, and I just set my own personal Apple ID up with my work account for some reason. Those will have to be cleared off. So as you'll see in this example, users will be prompted to go through and they will need to release that email address from their personal Apple ID so that all this federation flow can start to work. So there's a whole flow to help users with that. On the linked page, the QR code, we give some really helpful tips on how to make all that happen. Okay, and over to Tamvir to talk about how to deploy Okta Verify and Fastpass.
Cool, thanks, Matt. So in order to set up all the goodness from Okta, what you want to do is actually deploy Okta Verify first. Okta Verify is going to be the foundation on which you set up and configure Okta Fastpass and device access. The first thing you're going to want to do is enable Okta Verify as an authenticator in your Okta admin portal. And within Okta Verify configurations, you can actually configure and turn on Okta Fastpass. From here, the next step we're going to do is we're going to turn on device management attestation. Actually, we're going to have to do this on both macOS and iOS. So first, we'll start with what this looks like on the Mac side. On the Mac side, the device management attestation is actually done using SCEP certificates. For macOS in this example, we'll go through and configure a dynamic SCEP URL, which basically just means that the certificates are going to be unique for every device and they're bound. Next, in your Jamf console, what you'll want to do is you'll want to deploy a SCEP profile that matches what you've configured on the Okta side. With this, you'll actually have device management attestation configured properly for macOS. When you're on the admin console in Jamf, the other thing you'll want to do is also set up the extensible SSO profile. What this allows you to do is it allows you to really take advantage of those really nice SSO experiences with Fastpass on native apps and web views. The last piece that's important for macOS is that you're going to want to actually deploy Okta Verify. Without Okta Verify, Fastpass and device access won't work. And this is made really easy with, again, Jamf Pro. You'll be able to quickly and easily grab and deploy Okta Verify. On the iOS front, you're going to want to set up the device management attestation in the Okta portal first, similar to what you did on macOS. The difference is for iOS devices, this management attestation is actually done as a secret key or a hint that needs to get configured for the application. So in this case, instead of creating a SCEP URL, what we're going to do is just create a new management attestation hint. In your Jamf portal, what you'll do is you'll actually insert that management hint in the app configuration as you're deploying Okta Verify on iOS devices. With this sets up the management attestation secret and just Okta management attestation altogether so that you'll be able to leverage Fastpass and leverage the fact that your devices are managed when you're granting access. The last step, similar to what you did on macOS, is you're going to deploy the extensible SSO profile on iOS as well. It's similar to what we had to do on macOS, and it does similar things even on iOS devices. And that's it. Once you've configured this, you should have Okta Verify deployed on both your macOS and your iOS devices, and Fastpass should be up and running. The next thing we're going to do is set up device access. And specifically within that, we're going to set up desktop password sync. The first step in configuring desktop password sync is actually turning it on in your tenant. To do this, you're going to go into your Okta admin console under settings and features, and you should be able to turn on desktop password sync for macOS for your organization. Once you have that enabled, you should be able to search for and add the desktop password sync application from the app catalog into your org. The key reason why you want to do this is one, well, first, it actually enables desktop password sync for your organization. But next, the other piece that you're going to grab from the app instance is you're going to grab the client ID and the client secret. Because when you go over to the Jamf console, you're going to want to take that client secret and actually set it as a configuration for Okta Verify. And so here, what you'll and the specific SSO extension that's needed for platform SSO. So as you're configuring that SSO extension, not only did you put in the secret from the app instance in Okta, but the other thing you're going to do here is actually configure a second SSO extension that's different from the one you created with OCTA Fastpass. The key difference here is that this is going to be a redirect extension, and this is actually leveraging the new platform SSO capability underneath. Once this is configured, you can deploy this profile in addition to the one you have with Fastpass, and that should be it. You should be able to, shortly after deploying this payload, you should be able to validate the desktop access, desktop password sync flows on your macOS devices. And with that, I'll hand it back to Matt to talk about BYOD.
Perfect. All right. So what we're going to do here is set up user enrollment with Enrollment SSO. So the first thing you're going to want to do is enable single sign-on in Jamf Pro for Okta if you haven't done this already. So you don't do this through the Jamf Pro console under system settings and under single sign-on. You go in there and we have some great guides on how to set up Okta as an identity provider. Next up, you want to enable the checkbox for enable single sign-on for account-driven enrollment. Now, what this does is this enables that enrollment SSO behavior, which is where you get the Okta Verify app prompted to install right at the beginning of the onboarding process. If you leave this unchecked, the user will have to log in and activate Okta Verify themselves. Again, Enrollment SSO puts that IDP app at the very beginning of the enrollment process, and that's exactly what this checkbox does. You're going to want to put your org ID as the URL and that same management hint that we use for iOS management attestation in the management hint field as you see here. And then step 3, you probably want to configure DLP policies. So one of the best parts of this whole BYOD solution is that separation of personal and work in a very clean way. So here you define how data should flow between managed, which is your work, and unmanaged, which is your personal applications. So anything pushed to your device through the Jamf self-service app, which is a managed app, you're able to define the direction of flow of data, and also define things like what should happen with AirDrop and other kind of share sheet configurations. Now, you don't have full restriction capabilities on user-enrolled devices. There's only so many that you could do. If you use that QR code, you could see details of what you can and cannot do on user-enrolled devices. But these are the essentials, again, where Apple has balanced that management, security, and privacy components to make sure that what is needed is available from an IT perspective, but privacy is respected from a user perspective. The last step is to actually set up your user enrollment environment. In short, you have to have a well-known file that is placed on a server that uses the same domain for your account. So that in this case, anything like matt@jamfautos.com, you would need to have this file at jamfautos.com, where you tell the system where to find your MDM server to do the user enrollment process. So this is something you have to work on with your web team. But again, lots of details and on how to set that up through the linked instructions. Okay. And then finally, last but not least, is how we set up mobile ZTNA. So you have all this great identity stuff set up. How are you going to get secure managed access to your applications on a mobile device, for instance? First step is to, again, create an identity linkage between the Jamf Security Cloud, which is where you manage all your access network application policies with Okta. So you set that up. And then after that, you create an activation profile. An activation profile defines the capabilities that should be enabled for a deployed device using the service. So network access is our ZTNA service. You can optionally add all these other capabilities, kind of part of the whole trusted access solution. But in either case, at least network access, and then under the user identification tab, you would select the Okta identity. And what that's basically saying is for all devices that receive this activation profile and are activated using it by the Jamf Trust app, it will A, have the ZTNA capabilities, and B, will authenticate the user via Okta. And that will kick off as long as you've done all the Fastpass stuff and things we've talked about in a moment ago. You will have that great passwordless experience to log in using Fastpass. As far as testing this, a great thing to do is try this My IP on a Map application. This verifies that once you've successfully authenticated, you are routing your traffic through the Jamf Security Cloud. If you try to access map.wandera.com without Jamf Trust activated, you'll get a forbidden notification. But if you are all set up and properly authenticated, you will be able to route through and you'll see your IP address on a map. Very fancy. And then the final thing here is actually how you deploy. So we've taken a lot of the complication out of like actually getting all the nuts and bolts working correctly to make everything line up. So in short, you just go to that activation profile, you go to the deployment tab, and then you can select the specific UEM and the OSs that you're trying to deploy to. And we've created all the configuration profiles and managed app configs and so on that you need. You just simply download those from here, upload them into your MDM, and then scope them and push them to their necessary devices, and you're all set. All right, so that's probably a lot, and hopefully that helps you understand like how to get the next steps on how to actually make some of this real in your organization. So we have this website that you could check out to learn more. If you have further questions, you can absolutely reach out to us there. If you want to get started with a trial, everything you need is at jamf.com/integrations/Okta. So with that, the last thing we wanted to make sure we cover kind of quickly here is like, what's next? So this year at WWDC in June, there were some very exciting new identity announcements that Apple provided. If nothing else, further proving their commitment to identity on their platforms. So with that, we're going to go through a couple of these, say briefly what they are and why they matter. So just-in-time macOS account creation, and specifically, this is that using an IDP that supports platform single sign-on, local macOS accounts can be created on demand using IDP credentials from the Mac's login screen. So this is a big update because why does it matter? This means that you potentially do dynamic provisioning of local macOS accounts without needing to do any sort of AD binding using native UI and native OS without a third-party tool. Now, again, this is something that will be coming eventually, but it is something worth calling out that this is a very exciting evolution of the platform, and Jamf Connect will absolutely help with a lot of these capabilities, but this is something that device access should be able to do over time natively on the OS. Next up, IDP group to local group mapping. So this is the ability for that using, again, an IDP that's using platform SSO. You can actually map a user's membership on their local Mac account, on their local Mac, to be mapped to group memberships in their IDP. Now, why this is exciting is because now you can allow or deny capabilities for a user on their Mac based upon their IDP group assignments, in the cloud. So this is a huge step towards achieving least privilege, and it really is something that Apple has made native, again, through a combination of MDM, the OS, and the IDP to make all this happen. We mentioned this already, direct federation with Okta and ABM and Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager. So now those managed Apple IDs can be integrated directly with Okta without requiring that federation through Azure AD or Google Workspace. So pretty simple here. For Okta customers, this is a way easier configuration. It's way more reliable. You don't have a dependency upon Microsoft or Google to get all this working. And you can do some great customizations. So very excited that this is coming through for all of us. Now, to that end, one of the interesting things that they did do is not only provide like first-party support for Okta right alongside Microsoft and Google. But they've now made it so almost any IDP can adopt this by using open standards. So why is this important? This matters because now if you have a different IDP besides Okta, Microsoft, or Google, you can technically make this work through ABM. Now, the trick is that identity provider has to support all these right standards for single sign-on and account provisioning, and for CAPE, which is signals different changes in a user's record. But assuming that could be all set up, then it is theoretically possible for custom identity providers to be able to support ABM integration. And then account-driven device enrollment. So this is very cool because this, again, is a further evolution of like what Apple did with user enrollment on mobile. But what this does is this enables full device MDM onboarding for macOS and iOS devices through the use of a managed Apple ID and IDPs by extension through that federation we talked about by using native OS UI. Now, this is great because this is now making onboarding into MDM easier, not just for iOS devices, but Mac devices as well, where before you'd have to like either go through Apple Auto Device Enrollment, which is great, which we talked about a little earlier. But what if you bought your device like off the shelf, or someone brought it in, or it was a recycled device, and for whatever reason you didn't have automatic device enrollment set up? This is a great way for you to not have to share links or download apps or do stuff to get enrolled. You use a native macOS or iOS UI, type in your email address, and then have that great identity-based login experience to be able to bring management to that device. So it's a big step in the fundamental way that Apple enrolls devices into MDM. All right, next up, the iCloud Keychain Sync for managed Apple IDs. Now, up until now, managed Apple IDs have always been restricted on what they could do because it was not possible to use iCloud Keychain Sync for these managed Apple IDs, meaning things like continuity and just, again, iCloud keychains, your iCloud keychain would not actually be able to sync secrets between devices. Now, this really made a lot of the capabilities of the whole platform that is enabled by Apple IDs. It really inhibited those managed Apple ID adoptions. Now, with that roadblock cleared, it's really laying the foundation for managed Apple IDs to really help be adopted within organizations. Now, following on that is a really cool capability called Passkeys for Work. Now, this is using that new managed Apple ID iCloud Keychain Sync. Passkey Sync will allow you to exchange passkeys between managed devices only, using attestations from the MDM to make sure that that device is cryptographically managed by the right MDM, and only those devices that are managed by the right MDM will be able to use iCloud Keychain Sync to send these passkeys between each other. Now, this is a big deal because up until now, passkeys have very much been a consumer technology, and that would mean that they overly synchronize, like very gratuitously synchronize that passkey between a personal device and maybe a corporate device. So if I were to get a passkey on a corporate device, it'd be very easy for that to end up on my personal device and log in and access data from there, which violates a lot of the core tenets of zero trust security. So it's a big step, and Apple is the first one to actually do this with passkeys at a scalable OS level way. All right, so with that, strap in for an exciting few years of identity innovation on Apple devices. And on behalf of Jamf and Okta, we're very excited to be working closely together to deliver these capabilities to you all in the market. So thank you for your time, Tamvir. Thank you for joining and helping out. And
thank you for having me.